As you know, we're trying to create kind of like a playbook. We have a lot of people who are coming into the industry wanting to open up maybe their first time or looking to expand, either expand their concept or even expanding their existing location. Like Forbes Mill, as you know, expanded their bar lounge area. And so we just are kind of putting together a couple of pieces from hearing from various people who've gone through experience of what does it take, what kind of challenges and roadblocks and things like that. So we were looking forward to hearing a little bit about what you've been going through and any kind of tips you might be able to share with us too.
I wish we could have done this like a few months back.
Right? You're like, it would have been great if we had done this before I started.
I know, but I think it's a super smart idea because this has been, for me, obviously, as we know, it's the very first time doing this. So I, grew up in tech, didn't do
Yes.
anything in the hospitality industry. And I'm like, that learning curve is so steep. It's so steep.
Yes, it is very steep for sure. I mean, I've had a lot of my own share of experience.
Right.
So we've opened up 7 locations and each one has their own challenges and continue to still today have challenges.
I believe it. I believe it. It takes a certain kind of person. And sometimes I wonder if I have that in me, but so far so good.
I've gotten a sense of your drive. I know that you do.
You
So
think? Okay, good. Well, your words and God's ear.
yes. And what's great is that there's so much, I mean, the one thing about restaurants is that there's such a tight community that there's always somebody wanting to help, right? And that's why another reason why we wanted to really create this, because there's so many different people, if it's in Los Gatos and just that community or other restaurants throughout the Bay Area or even further out, that once they hear, oh, I'm going through this, they immediately want to, it's like, you're part of this family where it's like, oh, let me help you. Let me make a recommendation. Here's a good idea to keep in mind. So yeah,
Yeah,
it is a very tight.
it's super great. The community's been awesome. And it's funny because you mentioned Forbes Mill. I was actually there yesterday evening. I stopped in. I haven't been since they remodeled, and everybody there behind the bar was super awesome. They're like, welcome to the neighborhood. Like, that's so exciting. And like, where are you going to be? So all that stuff. So it's fun to feel like that energy now starting to like come my way, So it's definitely an exciting time.
Yes, for sure. I would start the question to you, Mel, in regards to, you shared a little bit about your tech and the experience of, your passion and why you're actually opening the concept. It'd be great to hear about once you had the concept, what was your next steps? Like, what were the first things you started to look at to be able to bring this new concept to life?
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, there was a lot of starts and stops in this whole journey. I think I mentioned this to you before, just because it is so scary and like taking that leap and that jump, like it took a lot for me. And for me, it was, I mentioned to you too, is my mom passing away, where I was like, okay, this is a trigger for me to know, like, if I don't do it now, I don't know if I'll ever do it. So I need to just, bite the bullet and just kind of go for it. So I think one of the first things I truly did was figuring out financials, right? I had to figure out and that I think was really the hardest part too, is determining a budget for something that you have no idea what all those moving pieces are, right? So, starting with a blank spreadsheet was really, really tough. I had luckily enough met somebody who was like, listen, I have sort of like a skeleton sort of budget for you to like even just like pop in the different things that you should be thinking about. And so I use sort of that framework of a budget spreadsheet, which if we could create something for somebody, even if it's just like the bare basics and you can fill in sort of like the blanks, would be amazing. But that's what I did to really look at like, is this even feasible? And then, my idea specifically of a champagne bar, which is niche. And even now getting feedback of people saying, you sure you really just want champagne from Champagne in France? And I'm like, yes, I want it to be very special, very niche. And so we're pivoting, we're kind of like iterating on things, but, understanding, is this even something that would make sense, right? So I think for me, kind of developing that whole model of like what it is that I'm actually wanting to put out there, and then determining financially like what makes sense. And for me specifically, I put aside a certain amount of money, and I told myself, because this is so specific and I haven't done this before, I'm giving myself 5 years. So, even with the lease signing, I said, I want 5 years to make this a reality. if I get to a point where it's just not revenue generating, where I can't really sustain it in the long term, then I'm going to have to walk away from it. And so like I have my accountability partners that are literally there to say, okay, Mel, we know you want to keep pushing and keep pouring things in, but if it's not working, it's not working. So that model, like, you know, determining what is that budget that I have, like what are the investments that I can actually make into this business, those were all like sort of the very first things to put together. And obviously that budget is still, I just got contractor bids back and I was just like, holy shnikes, like there's where my budget's already like hemorrhaging, right? So but I think that was definitely the first step for that. And then after that, it was just really, I started to just kind of start looking at locations, which I don't know what the right proper sequence is, which is also funny because I did talk to a couple of people in the industry. And I'm like, you know, I was looking for like a project map. Like, what is step one? What is step two? Like what, you know, what comes after? And most people were saying there isn't really a proper sequence to any of it. And so I'm like, okay, so I'll just kind of go by the seat of my pants and just try to figure out what I think is the right next step. And then definitely took me a long time, months and months and months for to find a space. I didn't have a real estate person. Like I was driving through areas. I was going on the commercial websites. I was trying to see like, you know, driving up the peninsula. Is it, you know, maybe it's Palo Alto, maybe it's Redwood Shore, Redwood City. Like where do I want to be? Where's my demographic? So doing a lot of that research too, like figuring out like, what are the income levels in the different areas? You know, what are people, you know, willing to spend on, you know, a commodity like champagne, which is obviously very higher priced. And so that space search took a long time. And then finally, again, by chance, got connected with this real estate broker. And one day she called me up and she was like, Mel, there's this space. It's not on the market yet. I think it could be perfect for you. You should go check it out. And then immediately it's a space right next to you. Like I looked at it and I loved it. But that wasn't even like, then I'm like, okay, so now how do I find an architect? How do I figure out somebody that can actually share my vision and help me bring this to life, right? So thankfully, my real estate broker, she introduced me to the architect that I'm actually working with now. And I had to convince him that the space would work. Also, me not knowing all the commercial requirements, ADA requirements, all the things that you need to do and have in order to make a space work. I love doing reno in the house, but that's not the same thing by any stretch, right? So all of those requirements were so crazy. And we literally dug into the walls. Like we were like, can we remove this wall? Like, what's the flooring underneath? What's the ceiling? Like what's the HVAC situation? Like all these things. And then finally he goes, I drew out like on a little plan, like how I think the bar could be laid out. And finally he was like, because we wanted a long bar in the beginning, kind of along the wall, like typical like rectangular bar. And then my dad was here with me and we were kind of noodling on stuff. And all of a sudden my dad was like, what if we did the round bar? Like, what if we did it just kind of like, it's, you know, it seemed not right for the space initially. And then we kind of sketched it out. And then finally my architect was like, Jeffrey was like, you know what, Mel, this is going to work. This is great.
I think it also looks really sleek. I mean, I've seen it, you know, what you have posted, and I think it actually has a lot of class. I think it's beautiful. So
I think it's going to be stunning. But yeah, it wasn't a slam dunk by any means, like especially with the space. I just was in love with the location, as you know, because you're right there. But I was just like, there's foot traffic there. I loved the size. That's another thing. It was like Goldilocks, right? I looked at spaces, they were super big, and I immediately felt overwhelmed. I'm like, this is, you know, what would I do? And then there were spaces that were way too small. I looked at a little tiny place in Saratoga. And then finally this one, it was like, okay, Goldilocks found it. Like this is, you know, I could seat around 20 people, max occupancy is 30. Like that feels right to me. But yeah, it was like, that was probably one of the hardest things is your spot, right? Finding where you
location for sure is key. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because I want to break down a couple things that you shared. So I think one, like the financials is so crucial important because there are so many people, especially like yourself, who are coming into a new industry. They're really not sure. There's so much more to think about than you might like you said, from doing a home to doing a commercial space, right? There's permitting that's different, the ADA, the equipment, that you have to really be able to optimize your space so you can, one, have a great guest experience, but also think of your team that you're going to put into place to ensure that they're feeling successful in their environment, that they can actually produce the level of service that you would like.
Mhm.
So I think that, one, that's extremely important to be able to have that understanding. And it sounds like, you're like how I've had a lot of my experiences is like trial and error and learning. And that's why we wanted to create this playbook, because I think it's also so helpful to have idea and insight and tips and resources on supporting people coming into, if it's opening their first concept or expanding. For us, we actually use, this was a very long time ago, before my Oren's Hummus days. Probably about 15 years ago, I actually looked at a space in Willow Glen, and I had a connection with a company called AOCSF. And so they're like an accounting team, if you've heard of like Vine Solutions. I don't know if you've ever
Mhm.
heard of them, but so they actually do help with creating kind of like a rendering for financials. And so I think it's actually really great that you shared about, like, it would have been really helpful if I had like a template to go by. So what I can do is I'll go back to them and have them create that for me, that we can also offer if anybody is interested in that resource. I have one personally that I've used for ours that they did create for us. But I think it would be really helpful for other people starting on, opening a new concept, to say, here's a playbook of things to think about, and here are some tools too to help support you through this process. So I will definitely take that as an idea and go back to them and say, can you help us create this for, people starting out? On top of the financials, you also said something about like having a budget of 5 years, right? One thing I do know, going through, my multiple restaurants and also helping a lot of our clients at the startup of their openings, it minimum at 3 years, you have to almost anticipate that you are not going to make money. And after
Mhm.
3 years, that's usually where you see, I mean, everybody kind of ramps up. I won't name who, but I recently was speaking with a client, and they are, opened up, and they were super successful because they were the new shiny thing on the block, and everybody wanted to go there, and they just had the best year possible. But then year 2 and year 3, it started to even out, right? And now they're at that third year where they're saying, okay, we are in a place that we see profits. It's close enough to a percentage that we want. So we're going to keep going.
Mhm.
But a lot of people think restaurants, and they see these beautiful restaurants and these beautiful concepts, and they're like, wow, they must be making a killing. But I will say that I see a lot of restaurants that are out there, and getting 10% is kind of an average for a lot of restaurants. 10%. If you're a breakfast house or with a bar, it goes closer to 15 to 20%. It really depends on the concept, but it's not like you're out there making millions of dollars on a restaurant, right? Concept. It's not how people think that you actually are able to gain that kind of profit line from. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of HR, a lot of things that can make that difference. And you have to prepare for that, right? And so I think it's really great that you're like, 5 years, 5 years, and then I can really reevaluate if I'm going to keep going or not. So
For sure. And I mean, the whole thing of you won't make money in the big, and I totally get that. And then even the fact, like you mentioned, which totally resonates, all the new places that are popping up, even in Los Gatos, like everybody's super excited about it. So Winston will be the same. People will be excited about it. And then how do you sustain it, right? What's your customer experience? Like what, are they coming for the champagnes? Like, what is that going to look like? So I'm nervous about it, but at the same time, I know we're doing this sort of playbook conversation for people that want this industry, like, for long term. Maybe for me, again, I'm a little bit different because this is a passion project for me, right? Like this is for the love of it. And I'm just like, and everybody that's in this business kills me when I say this all the time. I'm like, if I break even, I'm happy.
yeah,
To me, it's about like, I love champagne so much, and like bringing these beautiful beverages that most people haven't even heard of because they're so used to what they get in the grocery stores. That to me is the goal, and the education around it, and people like coming together over it. And like, but yeah, it's truly, if I can just pay my bills with this, I'm good. Like I don't, the goal isn't to get rich, which we won't in this industry, I'm pretty sure.
you also mentioned like Forbes Mill, right? They've been a client of ours for forever, 20 plus years. One of the things that I feel that they're super successful and why they continue to be so successful. And almost any night you walk in there and their bar and their lounge is packed. And I really do believe, like you mentioned, how they felt so welcoming, welcoming you to the neighborhood. They were so kind. Zach, for example, he's one of the bartenders there. He has been there for 20 years, right? And Dean and Darren, they're always there. They have the presence of, we care about our customers. And so I do also believe that is a very big piece, that you have this passion, you have this drive, and finding people to be able to speak that same language that you have and then turn that to your guest experience is going to make it where it's not just a passion project, but it actually becomes a profitable passion project for you.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, the staffing, which obviously I haven't even really crossed that bridge. I mean, sort of, but I'm nervous about that for sure. Just because the fact that I really would love someone to be that culture fit for what it is that I'm trying to do with Winston, and also to have that passion around it. And I've just been hearing it's so hard to find those folks that, will want to come and be, obviously you're the owner, your lifeblood is different in this business, but yeah, finding people that are just as passionate about it, that's a challenge. And yeah, I'm a little nervous to see who I can discover out there to help.
Yeah. One of the things I would recommend in that sense, is something that we do internally for our culture and the way that we build our core values within our organization at Oren's Hummus, is you also want to have, when you're interviewing people, for example, I can have the best candidate that looks amazing on paper and on their resume. And then when you start to speak them, asking, particular questions to see, like, what is their knowledge of champagne? Have they tried it? Even do a little tasting and have them kind of explain it to you. And, getting somebody to understand your concept, and you can see internally if they light up, if they get excited, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we do in our interview process, is we don't just talk about what do you know about financials and P&Ls and, but we actually talk about things that happen with our core values. And immediately, like, I actually just have a production manager, because we're doing retail now at one of our locations. We're going to be going to Costco's and Whole Foods and stuff like that. And one of the things, we've had 10 different amazing qualified, like overqualified candidates for being FDA approval. But we actually just did an offer for a candidate this morning. And the young lady that we're going to hire, hopefully, she accepts hopefully today. The reason why we hired her is she had the experience, and maybe she didn't have as high of experience, but the way that she spoke was all about the way that she would speak and coach and listen to her team, and how passionate she had already done research about our company, and she loved our food. She went and visited it. Like, you could just see that spark of, I am this player that I want to be a part of the culture that you're already showing in your restaurants. And I love your food, and I'm bringing that to the table, rather than somebody who comes in as a candidate, it's like looking for a job, just asking the question, well, what do you know about us? If
1,000% agree with that.
somebody hasn't even looked up your concept and they're just coming and looking for a job, they're not your person.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with that 1,000%. I think that passion and that sort of spark goes a long way. And even like when you said, I personally like to go to places where I can come to the bar and I see them smiling, and I see them being engaged, and I see them wanting to be there. That to me makes such a huge difference. And that's what I'm hoping to create with Winston, that, that we're all just having the best time being there, and just, the vibe. I know.
Difference definitely makes a difference. People want to be feel like they're valued and they're cared. So yeah, if you find the right people, then I definitely believe it returns into the success of the company. So
Makes
yes.
sense.
And
Totally.
then as far as architects and, GCs, I mean, we at, I Spy, we work with a lot, and obviously I sent one to you already. But again, it's one of those things that in our playbook that we hope to create of, here's some architects that we recommend. Here's some PR people that we'd also recommend if you want some PR, here's a couple of GCs. Looking back at your, going through this process so far, obviously you already have these people, but what other kind of either tools or tips would have been helpful for you, that if, like you said with financials, right? If somebody had given me this, it would have helped me. Is there anything else that you can think of that would have been helpful during that process?
Personally, yes. So even just coming up with the brand identity for Winston, logos, whatever kind of, website, all the stuff I had to source it together myself. Like for some crazy reason, I found this company that created, which is not even done yet, so I need to still do work on it, but created a website for me, like did all the layout for free as long as I write a review from them on Trustpilot or something like that. So I have the website, but like it took me forever to like, I wasn't tech. I don't know how to create a website. So, figuring out your domain, the logo, like this little logo, I created it on
Oh yeah.
Canva. So I did my own logo and I was like, okay, but let me actually reach out to some of those folks that I worked with in my tech days. Like we did branding, we did, all that stuff. And people come back, and that's another thing to consider, your budget, right? People come back to me and I'm like, oh, I know these people, maybe we can figure out a good deal. $30,000 to create a brand identity for me, to help me with fonts and colors and whatever. I'm like, I can't, I can't. I mean, I know it's important, but I just couldn't do it. So I'm like, so this stuff, I had to do it by myself. And like, thankfully I have some creativity, but that's so hard. How do you come up with that? Who, who can help you kind of make your vision come to life? And I don't know how many iterations of this logo I had, and the fonts I had, and the colors I had. And, even in the beginning with the space, I was like, oh, I'm going to go with, those lush green colors. And then I'm like, every other champagne bar has a lush green color. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I want to change it. Also dark blue, everybody has it. So I'm still trying to figure out like where I can go that's just unique and different, just a little bit setting me apart from others. But like all that stuff, that creative design, and that was hard. That was so hard. And you're committing, right? Like you're committing to your logo, to everything being branded somewhere out there. And like, that was nerve-wracking for sure. And I didn't know where to go for that. So
no, that's a great point. I mean, it's interesting that you say that, because Nisha and I always say his name wrong. It's Tomas. Tomas. So Nisha and Tomas are amazing, and she could speak a little bit about her background, which we don't necessarily need to get into, but I mean, we could add that as well into like our playbook and to our tools of suggestions. She has worked with a lot of, we have a very nice, kit of explaining all the different kinds of experience that they both have and bring to the table, but they have done wonders. I have worked with a lot of companies in my past, and I have yet to find someone as good as the two of them. We're about to launch in March, our website, as we have a new logo. They custom created all these icons for us for our platform. I mean, all kinds of stuff, but she started with a style guide. So it was a style guide, and she kind of threw some imagery, and we, things that you either find on like, Instagram or Pinterest or wherever you may, magazines, and you kind of put everything together of your look and your feel and elements and color schemes that you do like. And they help you to bring this brand of what your vision is to life. And it was a really amazing experience. Like I had so much fun doing it. And it was, to me, I wanted something that was, casual, but sleek and sexy but approachable. And like, I just even like, sometimes I'll just send her a little thing of like, here are my keywords. And then she'll like throw some stuff back at me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you 100% got what I was tracking and saying with you.
that's magic. If you can make that happen, it's magic. I half the time sit here and I'm like, I know what's in my head, but I don't know how I can get that out there. So that's hard. So having someone, like you, that's amazing to iterate on these things and to truly figure out like what it is that I just wanted to love it. I was like, I just wanted to love it. Same with even the name, which the name for me was awesome, because when I was working at a different place, one of my coworkers came in one day and they knew I was doing the champagne bar. And, every other champagne bar is called Bubble Bar, Bubble Bliss, Fizz, like very cutesy, all good. But then I was like, I just wanted to be different. Like my architect also was like, yes, Mel, we know different, but
I like it. It's edgy. Like it's got a nice,
and she came in one
it.
day and she was like, Mel, I have the perfect name. I think I told you this. And she was like, and I was like, oh no, what is it going to be? Like, ooh. And then she was like, it's going to be Winston, like Sir Winston Churchill and his love for Paul Roger champagne. And I'm like, oh my God, done. And from that point on, I referred to it, wasn't even really existing. I referred to it as Winston, and it stuck. That's what it was.
Awesome.
I love
when that magic
formal.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, those ideas are always really hard to translate. And I just consider myself a translator for sure.
It's amazing.
You're great.
What some people said. Oh, thank you.
That's an amazing skill to have, for sure.
Yeah, it's rarer than I assumed. Yeah, but it's a lot of work and and it does take, so much time as you're seen to iterate and just make sure that you're, all right, I have greens in my mind, but that's so many different things. And what is it going to pair with? What's it going to look like on dark and, light backgrounds, all that stuff. So
My
yeah, I
Pinterest
do.
board literally has evolved so much. It's so crazy. Like I have a million things on there and I scroll back down to the beginning and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, what is this even? And like, it's just obviously, yeah, as you go through this journey, things definitely change. But what's also hard for me personally is I mean, I don't know how most other businesses, if they do it with partners, if there's other people, I'm by myself, right? I'm completely doing this on my own. I bounce it off my parents and my brother, and some of my friends, but I'm like, where's this? Who can I like, you know, chew through with this stuff, right? And like figure out like, does this make sense? Is this, it's super hard. So, being a one woman show, I'm like, oof, I can only trust my gut half the time and be like, you know what, this feels right. Like this feels like this is the right direction. But a lot of times I miss sort of that other sort of bounce off person.
Yeah,
I can
that
imagine.
decision paralysis can be really intense. One thing we always try to do is share options on social media and on our newsletter list, or maybe that could be like a list of 10 of your friends that you trust or whatever that is, but just really taking the extra step to be like, all right, I'm stuck between these two variations. Like, what do you think? Although Misty and I still usually decide independently of all the feedback we get, but it's nice to have in our head, like, how is this going to be perceived by people that have not been staring at this for months,
And we did do that too, Mel. We did a newsletter and a blog, and I put it on Instagram, and we asked for feedback and thoughts. And so it does make it fun, and it also allows people to get excited, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like,
Because they're part of it. They're part of the
yeah,
journey,
bring
right?
things to life on it. Yeah, definitely also, creates that excitement for you too. So,
That makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
I
And
know,
it's-
and just going back one more time on when we talked about the sort of the other financial pieces too, the other hard part for me in the beginning was, I mean, setting up a business bank account is one thing, but figuring out like doing your EIN number, I had to find a CPA that actually was okay to like figuring out, like I had a CPA personally, but I talked with him and he was like, I can't do this business with you. So I had to find a new CPA. I actually had to find a law firm or an attorney to help me with creating my LLC. I know we're going like way back to the beginning, but all that stuff too was like, what do I even need? What am I setting up? Is it an LLC? Is it a whatever sole proprietor? Like what is my classification? What makes sense? So all that stuff too in the beginning was kind of overwhelming because I'm like, I don't know what it should be. So finding all these people and then like engaging with all these people was another really big sort of hurdle I had to like cross right at the onset of everything.
Well, that's actually a perfect thing that you just shared, because we also have an interview that we're going to be conducting with, his name is Alden, and all he does is specialize in restaurants. So he works for Fisher and Phillips. And so I call him the bulldog, because anybody who I've ever referred, even if you're like in a pocket case or any kind of, issue legally, he's just the guy that cuts through and it will protect you. So a lot of times we get silly things that come our way as operators, where somebody will think that they have a lawsuit against you for some reason. And what I loved about Alden, I'm the kind of person that it's about principle. So I'm not going to just go, sure, I'll give you $10,000 to make this go away. I'll pay my lawyer $10,000 to set the tone that you can't just come after us and sue us. And we did not do anything wrong.
Love it. Yeah.
So I call him my bulldog, because he just does not settle. He does not go through that mediation of, sure, we'll pay off and move on. He's amazing. So we actually have an interview coming up with him to speak about kind of those things of like, what do you need to know legally as you're looking at your financials and opening up a new concept, or opening up your first one? Do you do an S corp? Do you do a C corp? What's the EIN? What other things do you need to know legally? There's all these courses now that as an employer that we didn't even have to pay for a year or 2 years ago, that now you have to pay for, your RBS, and you have to pay for your food handlers, and you have to pay for harassment. Like there's this long list of things that you now have to pay for that you also want to make sure that you're aware of, because coming into the industry, You're like, what's workplace violence? What do you mean?
I
I'm
know.
what?
Yeah. All those, right.
So,
Yeah. All those things are, it's crazy. Yeah. This is the thing too. Is like, I don't know what I don't know to this day. Every day I found out something new where I'm like, oh, I didn't know I needed this. All the permitting, like aside from like my liquor license, I need a seller's permit. I need to work with the alcohol and tobacco, whatever, like to figure out all, like, it's great. All the taxation, like all this stuff. And I'm like, and even just the liquor license application, who is able to do this on their, like, it took me like a stack, right? And like the requirements and like sending out notices to people within a 500-foot radius and figuring all this stuff out. I'm like, it's like a PhD. You need a PhD for half of this stuff. So it's crazy. It's crazy.
yes, I agree. So we talked about financials. We talked about some of the things that would be helpful in the beginning. I want to be cautious of our time here. So, looking at, I'll just share for me personally, like as I've opened a new restaurant, and for example, we're about to remodel our Mountain View location. One of the things and parts of the brand that I've brought to life in our restaurant, and I will say I'm very proud for our Cupertino location. We were noted as Silicon Valley's best restaurant design. So, but one of the things that's really interesting about that is, yes, of course, we had our architect and designers, but the majority of the elements that we brought in to play were all because of me either traveling around the world, as I love to travel, and I'll take photos, right, of everywhere I go. When I see something, if it's a lighting or the booth or the hostess stand, literally the hostess stand I have in all my restaurants, and probably about 25% of the restaurants now in the Northern Bay Area uses the same hostess stand, is because the gentleman who's very well known in the area that creates a lot of this stuff is Taramiko. And I actually was in Paris and I saw this hostess stand that I just loved. So I took like literally a video and I took some photos and I came back and I gave that to them to build for me. And now every time I go into all these restaurants, I'm like, I know that hostess stand. So, but the reason I shared is because for me, that's something that also I think a lot of people, they may think about it. You kind of mentioned you have your Pinterest board too, but going to other restaurants, seeing what elements you like, what's working, optimizing in the kitchen, and looking at your Pinterest as well. I mean, I have these brass our booths and then this brass bar along my booths in all my restaurants, and I found that idea off of Pinterest. I was up in Hillsburg and I saw this amazing cafe that was like, it's no longer there, they unfortunately closed, but they had these beautiful garage door opening windows, right, for the whole like center of their location. And I fell in love with it. And this was like, 10 years ago, but I brought that element into to my restaurants. And now they're no longer there, but now I'm seeing that pop up places as well. So I think, sharing and seeing and taking photos and looking online, and then you see people also start to expand with those ideas as well. So it's always trying to find like what's different, what do I want to bring into my brand, and how do I find it? And when you do that, that just helps support the designers even more because they get that vision. Even if you change it, like you said, like, wow, looking back at the beginning, I'm totally different now, right?
Yeah.
But having a starting point that allows you to communicate so people get that tone, that feel from you, they can even bring more ideas to the table based on what you've shared. So
It's a big deal. I mean, that initial vision. So funnily enough, I would always say, I mean, I'm obviously building Winston in the way that I would like to see a space evolve, right? So for me, I love something that's loungy. I love something that's vibey. I love something that's a little darker and a little bit more moody, a bit of a speakeasy vibe. And so to me, that was like the vision. That's what I wanted to create. But I wanted it to be beautiful, and I wanted it to be at the same time, though, cozy and welcoming. So finding sort of that balance is super hard. And like, that going back and forth with the architect and the designer, that was probably, and still is, because we still like, you'd think the floor would be the easiest thing. Oh my gosh, the floor for me, I'm like struggling so hard because I have a certain thing in my head and it's in that space particularly, it's hard. And so I'm like, but I don't want to give it up. And then I sit there and I'm like, but are people gonna really notice it? Like what are the things that I have to fall on the sword for versus the things that I'm just like, you know what, Mel, like, it's okay, you can let it go. But my architect was ready to like a bunch of times with me because he's like, Mel, like, I get it. And it's just, but that stuff is so hard. And also then figuring out like, if I want this type of floor, I'm like, yes, it's a commercial space. People are going to be walking all over it. There's going to be heels. There's going to be things dragged. Like you need to understand, right? So for me, that aesthetic of like what I'm looking for versus what is feasible and what makes sense in a commercial space is so hard. Like kind of marrying those two and making sure that it's still aesthetically what I want is really tough. But the idea is all that, like you said, like and funnily too, now that I go to restaurants, I look at everything. I look at what does the bar look like? What's behind the bar? Like what's the flooring? What do they have in the ceiling? Where are their speakers? Where's all this stuff? Like what silverware, what flatware? Like how does it feel? Like all my friends are like, okay, can we just have dinner? And I'm like, no, not really. We're doing research at all times.
Yeah.
But that part, it is still a beautiful part. I can't even imagine like how you feel with all these places, like for Winston to actually be a space that I can open a door to and it's existing. Like it still blows my mind to think about that.
You're getting close. You'll be there soon enough.
I don't know. It's crazy that I'm so excited.
Well, it's interesting that you say the floors because the floors are a big one too. There are more and more restaurants, especially for like if you do have a back of the house, there's and we'll put this as a tip, but there's an eco grip flooring that I actually refer to a lot of our clients because it's a non-slip. So, you know, it gets really slippery. You don't want to have any kind of workman's comp issues, someone getting hurt.
Yep.
And especially in back of the house, we're seeing more and more companies that are switching to this particular kind of flooring. So that way it's non-slip automatically. That's the other thing that people sometimes don't think about. They let all their employees wear whatever shoes they want to. But if you actually wear non-slip shoes and make it part of your policy, you actually get a discount on your workman's comp policy. So, you know, there are also little tips like that that people may not even think about, right?
Yeah,
And
for
so,
sure.
and then we always get the question, I actually just had this question yesterday from one of my managers. He's like, I do not like the look of non-slip shoes. And I said, well, I have various kinds of heels and boots. And I'm like, I go get non-slip put on the bottom of them. You can do that too. And he's like, I never even thought about that. I've been in business for 25 years as a district manager, and I never thought about going and adjusting my favorite shoes to have non-slip put to them. So, but it is something that, you know, one of the main things that happen for workman's comp is people slipping. And so, especially depending on what kind of, you know, if you have decorative tile or what you're using for the guest space, you want to make sure that they're wearing non-slip shoes. And so if you make that part of the policy, you know, it's always good to also have like some sites that you could always recommend for people to be able to
Super
wear.
great point. I mean, yeah, that if that's part of the policy, you could get a discount. I had no idea. So that smart.
Yeah. It's the number one thing that
Yeah,
people
for sure.
get on is slipping. So yeah, because especially in smaller spaces, right? There's the liquid or somebody spills something or just the grease, you know, even if through one shift, it's like the floors can end up getting some kind of grease or some kind of grip or whatever's coming from the outdoors or what they're carrying. If they spilled food at some point, just starts tracking everywhere.
Yeah.
So slipping is also, you know, it's a big one to always keep in mind. So yeah.
For design in general, like taking a slightly more abstract view, what are the main things that people should be taking into account in both of your experience? Like flow, making sure you have a good guest experience, some of the other things you mentioned. What in your mind when people are looking for a space, which is the first step, what should they look for? And what are they going to have to fix?
Well, I'll say some big ones only because it's actually been an issue for me at Oren. So for example, we built our San Francisco location. And when we built that one out, there was nothing there. It was underneath, you know, a hotel apartment building. And so we just had a blank shell, which, you know, if it's either an existing location or it's a shell that a landlord's going to help you with TI, right, which is tenant improvements. So we ended up in San Francisco. We had a GC come in. There was no plumbing. So we actually had to, you know, do everything from scratch. The problem is here we are, you know, 6 years later approximately, and we have found out every year our plumbing just kind of keeps getting worse and worse. We think about design and how to make it pretty, but we don't think about the deeper things that can make an impact on you really, really bad in the future. And so we have found that our GC at the time created when he did the pipes, he didn't have a slope. And so because there wasn't a slope, it gets backed up. And so we literally have, like right now, we have the plumbers who come out probably 2 to 3 times a week because it's constantly backed up. I just got our invoices. We've spent over $14,000 just this past year on plumbing visits because of this issue. And so now I've had a quote, and the quote's about $35,000 to rip open the floor and fix it. So the reason I share it is because you really need to ensure that you have the best GC and that you are asking questions about the plumbing. Do I need to be aware of anything? You know, do we have proper slopes? Unfortunately, like you said, you kind of have to become this expert, you know, with your playbook of like, what are all the things that I need to know? So in years to come, I'm not spending 10 grand a year on plumbing visits, or worse, having to open up my floor and shut down because I have to do this huge repair.
That's
The other
crazy.
one is
I know those are like the unsexy things, right? But we have to
exactly,
think about all
yes,
that
you gotta remember the
infrastructure.
unsexy things,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, for sure.
The other one is electricity, right? It's like you have typical, you may already be going through this or will be soon, but you know, your landlords give you so much on your electrical panel, but that doesn't mean that based on, you know, you don't have a lot of kitchen equipment, but depending on what you're putting in the kitchen equipment, it can end up being, you may need more, right? It's like us for one of our locations right now, we're changing it into being retail. We have to change our, you know, our electrical, we have to look at our AC unit, like everything has to change. So it's always really important to be able to look at that at the beginning. Do I have enough electrical? What's that upgrade going to be if I need it to end up having more? What is my plumbing? You know, what ADA is, do I need to know? That they're like you said, the unsexy things, but they're super important because they will impact your business in the long
It
run.
makes sense. And it's interesting you say that because we did an analysis of the electricity for my space, and it's not ideal. We're already short. And like, so I reach out to the landlord, and you in the same building, it's a historic building. And I'm like, hey, Jim, what do we do with electricity? Like, can we like upgrade the panel, whatever? And he keeps telling me, this is the electricity you have.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, okay, so I already had to cut. I wanted to have a glass washer and a dishwasher for dishes. And so now I had to cut one dishwasher already. And I wanted 2 ovens. Again, our food is minimal, right? But it's still food. And I had to cut 1 oven because they just pull so much electricity. So I'm nervous about electricity for sure, especially because it already came up and nothing is even built. And so now I'm like, okay, how, you know, I can't get more per feedback. So how do I make sure that I'm not blowing a fuse on a daily basis?
And see, I think that that's really a good point is, you know, as somebody who's going and they have a space, they've gone through it, they now have the space, and now you're going through these kind of questions that you're now stuck and can't really do anything about, right? And so I think, again, going back to that playbook, it's like, here are the questions you should know before signing a lease, right? Let's talk about our plumbing issues. Let's talk about our AC, our roofing. What am I responsible for? Because we've had that same problem in our space in Los Gatos where we've had a lot of issues, and they're like, well, it's in your lease, it's on you. Right. So it's really important to make sure, like, what kind of costs do I have to repay for a roof? I mean, I'm just a tenant. There's a big roof here. Why do I have to pay $25,000? Right. I mean, those are just things that are really important to think about as you're signing a lease of, do I have enough electricity? What kind of equipment may I want? Think, you know, further cells as you can to say, okay, I may only need these 3, but I'm going to say I need all 6 of these kind of units. And what electricity am I going to need? So before I get into my lease, I can go back to my landlord and be like, well, can you do something about it? Because if not, I may need to move on. Right. And even if you decide not to, at least you've had that conversation, because landlords are more willing to do things to get you to sign the lease. But once you're in it, they're like, sorry.
And I think that's a really valid point too about the commercial lease. I never even saw a commercial lease in my life before. So getting this big document, I was like, that was slightly overwhelming to like make sure that what is in there, like, how do I interpret it? How do I read it? What do I even know I will need to be, you know, cautious about when it comes to this lease? So having, I don't know, again, someone that could like literally, like, I had an attorney friend, and I'm like, hey, can you look at this? And like, you know, can you make sure like this all looks good? And like the law firm that I hired, you know, but it's one of those things where like, I was nerve-wracked. I'm like, okay, I'm signing this big document and I'm committing myself for 5 years. Did I realize, like, did I pay attention to everything that I need to pay attention to? So that was definitely scary. Yeah. And it's like, that document is a language that half the time I don't even know if it's English.
Yeah. Well, we actually are going to be also interviewing a broker. His name is Steven. He's amazing. And he's actually helped a lot of my clients, just like and friends, like East Kennedy, who's also in Los Gatos. She's been struggling with like a few things for her lease, and he just helped her out just to help her out for free. So he's like super kind. He's amazing. He's very supportive. So we're also going to be doing an interview with him, just talking about some things to, think about when you are signing a big commercial lease and what things you should be looking for and take into consideration. So
Amazing.
trying to get all angles, so then that way we could create one thing to be really supportive to our clients and
Yeah, for
friends.
sure. You're touching on all the things. That's awesome.
Yes.
We only have about 10 minutes left, and I was hoping, Melanie, if you could give me an overview of your vision and what the plan is for Winston, so I can make sure to include that in our blog article, and eventually in the guide. That would be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, Winston is going to be a space where I want people to come. Either you're a champagne connoisseur or you know nothing about it. I want you to be able to come and be excited about the things that you get to taste there. I want you to learn about some of the history of these beautiful houses that go back centuries, that are in generations of families, that where the younger generation is now taking over and kind of experimenting a little bit more, because it is such a traditional industry. Understanding why champagne is so special. Why do I pay $50 for this bottle? Because it's been, in a cellar for 3 to 5 years. There's all these requirements, all these rules that make it so special. So like just even that, having these small grower producer champagnes introduced to you that you may never normally have an opportunity to taste. And then I really just want champagne to also be one of those beverages that it's not just for a birthday, not just for an anniversary, not just for New Year's Eve. It's a wine. It may be a little bit higher price, but it's a beautiful beverage that if it's Tuesday and you feel like having a glass of champagne, you should have a glass of champagne. And I think a little bit the trend is definitely going that way, that people are having it a lot more as just, in lieu of a glass of wine or something. And for people to just come and chill. I want them to hang out. Like, did you have a great day today? Was it a sucky day? Whatever day it was, I want you to come, meet some new people, connect with old people, just kind of like be in a space where you can like sort of, life is so crazy, like I think what's going on in the world right now is so crazy. So I feel like having a little bit of like a tiny little safe space where you can come and just kind of be for a little while, that's my goal. So oh my God, I'm getting emotional. It's crazy. I'm totally getting emotional, but yeah, that's kind of my vision for Winston. And then of course the space, I want it to be beautiful. I want people to come in and be like, wow, this is gorgeous. And, and I feel cozy here. And like, it's kind of like a living room, and you're just hanging out with friends. Sorry, guys. Oof.
Oh, that's great. I think that means you're doing exactly what you should be doing right now.
Yes, I agree. I agree for sure. So
that sounds wonderful. I would love to drink champagne in your beautiful bar.
Soon, hopefully.
Yeah. And do you have any gauge on your launch timeline or rough estimate that I can
It was
print?
supposed to be May, but we're getting the GC, all the GC bids came back now. My architect said it's probably going to be June, but I think once we actually pick a GC and figure out the timeline, like we still need the building permit. I hope it's still May, but it's slipping a little bit into June, but it's sometime in the summertime this year.
Okay.
and depending on their GC, just so from my experience, they always take a lot longer than they say they're going to. Sam, who I introduced you to, he's probably the only GC that I actually have ever used in all my history that gives you a timeline and gets it done in a timeline.
Crazy. I wish we had talked sooner, because that was another thing with my architect. I wanted to have like 5 GCs, and he was like, Mel, you need to understand. And I get it, of course. The vetting of it and like the process of like getting this out to bid is a lot. And so he was like, you can have 3. And then I had the 3, and then, but that's how, like who are the right people to do this job? Huge, obviously huge. One of the biggest things. So if I had known sooner, or I have had asked you sooner, it would have been beneficial to me, but now I'm on a wing and a prayer now.
I'm sure it'll be great either way. Just, sometimes they take a lot longer than they say.
I know.
Yeah. Let's hope not for your sake, but
I know. I could be a pain in the ass, but maybe that will slow them down. I don't know. It depends.
Depends on the contractor.
I know. They're like, we're not moving today. She's back again.
well, thank you very much for your time. It was fun to chat with you and just hear a
Always.
little bit more about everything. And we appreciate you taking the time so we can gather some tips and some ideas that we might, be able to turn around and make helpful for others.
I
So,
love that you guys are doing this. This is huge. Again, for someone that's never done this before, it's a big deal to have a place to go and like where to ask questions, where to find resources. It's huge. So yeah, I love it.
thank you. Well, have a great day, and I'm sure I'll see you around.
Yeah, for sure. Nisha, super nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you too. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.